In our last video, we took a closer look at how the entity limit during Mario Maker's play mode actually works and how it can be manipulated to create crazy contraptions. But that was only the first half of the story, because there is not only a separate entity limit when playing Mario Maker for enemies, but there is also one for all the delicious goodies that is handled separate from the normal one. This enemy limit can actually be manipulated the same way the normal one can be manipulated, and both can be combined to create really strange Mario Maker contraptions. In this video, we are going to take a closer look at the entity limit C, at what it covers and how to manipulate it. And in the end, we will be able to create relational operators in Super Mario Maker, custom key systems that can be tested, and levels where the whole floor disappears as soon as Mario collects a star. Just in case you haven't seen the previous video about the entity limit, you might want to check this out first, because otherwise a lot of the stuff we're about to discuss might not make much sense. The link is in the description. Okay, so are you ready? Let's do this. Okay, so first things first, what is the third entity limit, the entity limit C? Well, the entity limit C, or ELC, is the place where goodies like Yum Yum mushrooms and shiny stars are stored. Here, for example, we fill the normal runtime limit, the ELB, by loading munchers on tracks in. Since the ELB is full, the munchers in the question blocks can't spawn. Business as usual. Where things become interesting is if Mario hits the other question blocks, because those actually spawn mushrooms, even though the ELB is filled. This simple fact confirms that mushrooms aren't handled by the ELB, but by a third different entity limit, the ELC. The really interesting thing is that both of these limits exist separate from each other. Here we fill the ELB and the ELC, both, so that they contain exactly 99 items. Now exactly one muncher is able to spawn and exactly one mushroom. That's really interesting, because it allows us to manipulate both limits at the same time. But what items are actually handled by the ELC? Well, not many, which is pretty cool actually. Only mushrooms, 1-ups, stars, fire flowers and theme-specific power-ups are handled by this limit. These items are pretty interesting for a lot of different reasons. For example, they allow Mario to run away from them for a really far distance before they despawn. 1-ups only despawn after 78 blocks, and so do the other items handled by the ELC. Something to keep in mind when using this is that most other items despawn way earlier. So for example, if we enclose stars by using a one-way door, then the door disappears long before the stars are unloaded. And because of this, the stars start to jump away to the left here, and they unload way earlier. The fact that these items only despawn after a long range is quite useful, because it allows us to build a lot of interesting contraptions without having to load stuff onto track memory. Okay, so what happens if the ELC is full? Well, basically the same that happens when the ELB is full. Pipes and bullet blasters can't spawn any ELC items any longer, and question blocks can't release goodies. Just using this stuff allows us to build a lot of really interesting stages. Here, for example, we fill the ELC with nice and helpful stars. Now Mario needs to climb this wonderful star tower, but he needs to be careful not to eat any of the nice and shiny inhabitants of this place, because as we all know, eating stars in a star tower transforms the floor into shiny yet deadly coins and forces Mario to fall to his doom. So if our plumber wants to survive here, what he probably wants, he has to be really careful to leave the delicious stars alone and to safely platform towards the top of the tower before everything collapses. The reason why this works is actually surprisingly simple. All we do here is we load 100 stars into the ELC. Because of this, the blasters aren't able to spit out the mushrooms they're holding. If a star is collected, however, the blasters suddenly are able to spit out the mushroom, which in consequence destroys the floor. So the ELC basically works the same way as the normal play mode enemy limit, but there is actually one manipulation technique we can't do with the ELC. There is no easy way to overflow it. The normal limit can easily be overflowed locally by donut overflowing it. Sadly, there is no such easy trick possible for the ELC, or at least I wasn't able to find one. Because of this, setting up levels around the ELC is a little bit tedious, since we need to always have complete control over the amount of entities loaded in, and can't simply overflow it whenever we want to test for something. But the ELC actually has one huge benefit over the ELB, since it is extremely easy to permanently test for it, even if the room is resetted. More on this in a second. But first, let's take a quick look at a stage that combines a couple of ELC and ELB trickeries, and then let's take a look at how this stage could be made even better because of the ELC's great output testing tricks. Here, Mario finds himself in a mini roguelike stage. In front of him are a couple of question blocks. One of those question blocks contains a delicious mushroom, which allows Mario to double his size when eaten. Then the stage layout is randomized. Either the path towards the top opens up or the path towards the right, but never both. It looks like the path towards the right is opened this time. Because of this, Mario suddenly finds himself in the middle of a dangerous minigame. Here evil Magic Koopas shoot PlayStation button missiles towards him, while there are bouncers at the bottom which bounce poor Mario around. After a while, the shell-mat timer at the top expires and Mario is able to proceed. To his right is a pipe that leads to a small minigame challenge. Here 20 Goombas on tracks cycle towards Mario. At first glance this room may appear like a really evil place. But it's actually not. Actually, it's a really neat little minigame which Bowser built for Mario. Because if Mario manages to survive here and to kill 10 or more Goombas, then he's rewarded with a powerful Fire Flower power-up. If Mario kills less than 10 Goombas, however, no reward is given to him. Looks like Bowser got really creative here. Once Mario leaves this minigame again, the pipe that led to this minigame becomes closed. Now the only way further into the stage requires Mario to climb on top of vines while ouching saw blades try to hurt our brave plumber. And then the goal axe suddenly appears. That was it already? Oh, but wait, as it turns out there is a ridiculously complicated AND gate at the top, which only activates if Mario collected a total of 2 1-up mushrooms in this stage, so our plumber probably missed something somewhere. Better go back and do a little bit more exploring. Yeah, of course, there is a 1-up mushroom hidden at the top of the level, which Mario missed before. Now that he managed to actually collect this 1-up, the ridiculously complicated AND gate should actually trigger. And so it does, which finally opens up the path to the precious goal axe. Hooray! Okay, so how did all of this work? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. With the exception of the AND gate, that's absurdly overcomplicated. Okay, so first there is a simple clown car randomizer hidden out of sight. Each one of the 2 minigames then lead to a 1-up mushroom on tracks. If a mushroom on tracks is eaten, then the game remembers this even if Mario enters the subworld. Because of this, we are able to store the information how many shrooms were eaten over the course of the stage. In this area, there are 97 mushrooms on tracks hidden out of sight, and the 2 mushrooms to the left, but one of them is eaten. This loads 98 entities into the ELC, which are on track memory. Next, the last mushroom on tracks is loaded in, so we are at 99. The final area features a resettable AND gate that requires both bullet blasters to shoot. Since the current ELC count is at 99, only one of them is actually able to shoot and the exit is blocked. Okay, so the minigame Underground. Here we load 76 Goombas onto track memory out of sight. Then there are 20 normal Goombas, which Mario has to fight against. In the last part, we donut overflow the ELB for 12, and then there is a bullet blaster. This brings the ELB up to 109, if no Goomba is killed. So in order for one item to spawn again, 10 Goombas need to leave the game, because otherwise there is no open spawn spot. Which means that this contraption acts like a relational operator that tests whether the amount of Goombas defeated here is equal or greater than 10. It's a bit annoying to set up, but I'm so happy that this finally works. The reason why the minigame closes after Mario entered it once is because of simple spawn blocking. Okay, so the overcomplicated AND gate. Most of the stuff going on here should actually be pretty self-explanatory. Basically, the 2 mushrooms lead to a chain reaction that in the end opens up the path for the shell at the top here and allows it to defeat the Bob-omb. All of the question blocks here contain vines. Because of this, the gate is resettable by walking through a door. I actually haven't found a way to build a resettable AND gate before, and the reason why this works is because of a neat little Mario Maker trick I just recently figured out. If a muncher lives on top of a question block and this block is triggered by a shell, then the muncher bumps up a little bit but not high enough to actually land on top of the next tile. If there is a spring on top of the muncher, however, the muncher suddenly becomes extremely athletic and is actually able to jump upwards. That's a small trick that is extremely useful when trying to build stuff that stays resettable, because this allows vine blocks to push munchers upwards. Still, building such gates is extremely heavy on resources and becomes extremely challenging if we want not only to test if 2 out of 3 mushrooms were collected, like we did here, but let's say if 4 mushrooms out of 7 were eaten. Luckily, there is one last thing possible because of the ELC. There is one ELC item that we haven't talked about, and this is thunder! Whoops, wrong sound effect. Moment. Right sound effect. Yoshi X, because Yoshi X aren't able to release any of their content if the DLC is at or over 100. If there are several Yoshi X on screen, then they open up in the order they were loaded in. The first two always spawn Yoshis, the next ones progressive power-ups, but only if the ELC is not full. If it is actually full, then they can't spawn their power-ups. Here for example, we have a super simple setup. We load 93 mushrooms on track memory out of sight, then there are 7 mushrooms in front of Mario, and then there is a small room with several Yoshi eggs. If Mario does not collect any mushrooms, nothing happens here, and Mario needs to go back to the start. If Mario collects 1, 2 or 3 mushrooms, nothing happens as well. But if Mario collects 4 or more mushrooms, one of the Yoshi eggs is finally able to spawn, which grants Mario a key in return. So this super simple setup actually allows us to build crazy relational operators for mushrooms. We can test if Mario ate at least 3 mushrooms, or less than 5, and with a little bit of tinkering, probably also whether Mario collected exactly 5, or between 3 and 7, but not more or less. This allows us to basically build a custom red key system that can actually be tested for, and it's super easy to set up because of ELC blocked Yoshi eggs. We're definitely going to have a ton of fun with stuff like this in the future. Okay, so is there anything else to mention? Well, not really, but here's a random piece of Mario Maker trivia. Bullet blasters that contain 1-up mushrooms only spit 3 mushrooms out and become deactivated afterwards. And that's it for the ELC. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and maybe you feel especially like a Yoshi egg, unable to spawn a fire flower today, and want to hit the subscribe button as well. I hope that you have a wonderful day and to see you soon. Goodbye!